All right, so is it recording? Yes, okay. All right, let me see. No way. I left these in the sun. Oh, there we go. Oh, you can kind of see that. Oops. All right, so let's see here. Right now it's just Freddie in the class. No Steven or Scott. Scott's going to come later, but you'll watch Scott's video. You watch the video of Scott in it before you watch the one with just Freddie in it. All right. So we left off with the Meno, right? And within the Meno, and when you guys watch like the Allegory of the Cave over the weekend, we got a peek into Plato's, and I'm going to put Socrates. Did I spell it right? Socrates, yeah. Right. We got to look into their view on metaphysics, and also their view on epistemology, right? So we usually coin Socrates as being the initial, how do I say this? So he's the first ancient philosopher that we consider to be giving like significant work within the domains of epistemology, right? Well, pretty much everything, right? But Socrates never actually writes anything down himself, right? I mean, you guys saw that, right? So when you read the Apology, it was by Plato. When you read the Meno, it's by Plato. But Plato doesn't talk in any of these texts, right? Plato is always writing down on behalf of Socrates. This causes people to, wonder if Socrates even really existed, right? Maybe he didn't. The texts seem to be just so perfect. They just seem to be too perfect, right? This is kind of similar concerns we have about Jesus, right? Since Jesus doesn't write any of the Bible himself. Yeah, well, maybe Jesus didn't exist either. Yeah, these are two different ordeals, right? Because whether or not Socrates existed has no bearing on what's being said in what we read. Whether or not Jesus exists, well, that matters for every single thing in the text, right? But regardless, so we go from Socrates, he mentors Plato, and then Plato is going to mentor Aristotle, yeah? We'll get to Aristotle in a second. Let's recap what we talked about in terms of metaphysics and epistemology through the lens of Socrates and Plato, right? So we get two major ideas. On the more metaphysical side, we have this view of Platonic forms, and from this idea of forms, we get explanations about our identity, right? Why am I a person? Well, because all this material stuff down here in the world, right? All this like dust, particles, whatever you want to call it, right? This instance of it takes this form, right? So I'm trying to show you like my physical form, because I reflect this perfect idea of a person up here, right? And so this is where the perfect idea of goodness is. So anything that's good in our material world is good because it reflects this perfect concept, this perfect form, this ideal form of goodness in this weird Platonic world. So like if you look at that worksheet that I handed out about, or that I uploaded about this sort of Platonism, we call it, right? When it talks about this ideal world, this Platonic world, right? It's non-physical, it's perfect, it's not in space and time, right? It transcends us. We don't have any physical contact with this world, but instead, right, we access this world. And so here's going to be the epistemological claim here. We access the truth of the ideals through reason, right? And remember, he uses, so this sort of like all memory is recollection, right? This argument, or all learning is just remembering. Yeah. This is going to be, it's going to be in describing this view we call rationalism, where there are some things that I can know, and so here's going to be a really fancy word for it. A priori, right, before experience, right? So like math, right? We don't experience math forensically. I mean, think about it. Have you ever, right? Usually if this were a classroom, I'd be, hey, Freddie. Freddie's not really his name. Show me the number 2. And Freddie goes like this, right? And I go, whoa, is that 2 or is that fingers, right? Oh, shit, right? We're so woke right now. This is crazy, right? This gets explained, this sort of knowledge of numbers, which aren't perfectly instantiated here, but only imperfectly. So like markers, right? Those are crappy markers. Or like fingers, right? This isn't 2, but this partakes in the concept of 2. This material partakes in the concept of 2, right? But it is not 2 itself. It's an example of 2, but it is not 2. Yeah. This gets explained by this perfect heavenly realm, this Platonic heaven. Yeah. And we don't access it forensically or physically, but instead we access it rationally before experience, right? A priori. Okay. So that sounds really crazy, right? We also, this is very close to the idea of understanding identity through the forms, right? But we also get an explanation for behavior. Yeah. So so this, here we go. This is an instance of a person. This is an instance of a person. And this is an instance of a person. Person A, person B, person C, right? These are all 3 physically distinct items or tokens, but they still have the essence of a person in common. Yeah, they all participate in this perfect concept of personhood, even if they're not perfectly person. Yeah. And this notion of understanding categories or concepts or identities through this Platonic form, through this crazy ass metaphysics story, right? We then get a good, nice set of language to explain the behavior of person A, B, and C. So why does person A do different things? And so this is a dog. Then dog A, so this is we'll just call it dog, right? Why do these guys, A, B, and C, behave differently than material dog over here? Well, it's because they have different forms they instantiate, yeah? So it's not just identity that gets it's not just identity we get with the forms, and it's not just concepts, but instead it's an explanation for the behavior of everything around us. Yeah, that it's you could almost say we get a rationalist kind of science. We get with rational explanation for identity and behavior. Yeah, we get a rationalist kind of science where I can look at a thing and know how it's going to behave based off of the kind of thing that it is. Right. So I know that person A is not going to go and what are some stuff, Freddie? What are some stuff that a dog does that we don't?
Eat. I was going to say eat out of a bowl.
Eat out of a bowl.
Smell each other's butts.
Yeah, person A probably won't be smelling the butt of person B. Why? Because that is not something that people generally do, right? And that I don't know that from observing people. I know that by reflecting rationally on what it means to be a person, right? Okay, so if you have not looked at that worksheet that I uploaded, I think it was last Friday, on this Platonic notion of forms and rationalism, look that up, right? It's going to clarify a lot of stuff. So like most pupils of genius philosophers, or at least most genius pupils of other genius philosophers or thinkers, right? This guy Aristotle, who is going to leave Mesopotamia, go to Athens, right? So Plato is going to open up our first university. It's going to be called, Eddie, do you know what it's called?
The university.
Yes, it is kind of called, it's just called the Academy.
Yeah.
He's going to open up the Academy. Yeah, and this is a place where philosophers they're free to think, right? They also do a lot of wrestling there, right? Real physical dudes, right? At this point in time, there is no distinction between there's no real distinction between natural philosophy, which is what we would consider the hard sciences, and philosophical philosophy, which doesn't make much sense, right? It's all the same thing. Mathematicians are doing philosophy. Biology hasn't been invented, not until Aristotle gets here in a second. But pretty much everything that has to do with thinking really hard is going to be called philosophy. So Plato opens up the Academy, and Aristotle is going to come over to learn from Plato the same way that Plato learned from Socrates. Yeah, but this move is going to lead to Aristotle being the most important thinker in Western civilization. Period. I mean, from Socrates on, everything that has to do with Western thought, which includes, right, Greece, the Middle East, and everything up and over, right? Aristotle is going to be the most important thinker, right? Most of what we do is still Aristotelian, okay? Even though the Aristotelian physics, which we're going to get to in a second, even though that partially died off, right? It's coming back right now. Everything we do in biology is still Aristotle. Everything we do in psychology is borrowed from Aristotle. Most of what theologians do in this contemporary world is still Aristotelian. We'll get into this, right? Aristotle's he's going to create physics. He's going to write this book called The Physics, right? He's going to write the metaphysics, which is included in your guys's portal, but we're not reading it. That'd be really hard to read. Try reading the metaphysics. You may like it. We have, what else do we have? The posterior analytic, right? This is also included in our portal. This is the creation of the scientific method, okay? The scientific method that you've learned in the 3rd grade and continue to use now in your classes today is created by Aristotle as a rejection to that Platonic form rationalism. So Aristotle is going to move us from rationalism, and he is going to take us to empiricism. Yeah, is Scott here? Was that degenerate? Yeah, guys, we're still having like gang fights over the classroom. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be like that for.
It's okay.
This is Highland High School, by the way. No, it's not that. Okay. And so, where does this rejection come from? Yeah. So let's think about maybe not the intuitiveness, maybe not all the good explanation we get from this Platonic form talk, but let's think about the craziness that comes out of it. So, like, Freddie, what do you think is What do you think is so crazy about that idea of Platonic forms?
Would you say that that Tom Ford, you're talking about the idea that we can memorize something before we...
Yeah, right. So there's that idea that all knowledge.
Yeah.
So here's someone's head. Everything they know. Okay, all right, let's pause it. I think Scott's here. All right, guys. This is good. Oh, I can pause. All right, guys. Sorry for that weird pause. Yes, Scott's here. So it's not just Freddie. All right, so what was so crazy about the forms, about the Platonic forms?
Just the idea that you can know something before you know it.
Right, yes, before you see it. So
Yeah.
in the Platonic world, right, I mean, if Plato is correct, I don't know things by seeing them, because this would entail new knowledge, right? So anytime I see something I've never seen before, right? If Plato is correct, I don't learn anything new, but instead I'm kind of reminded of what was already in there, right? That if rationalism is the case, there has to be some knowledge that's just innate inside of me, right? And this is, according to Aristotle, this is stupid, right? It's really stupid that there's some like heavenly realm where all the forms or all the universals live. Really stupid, right? And so in the Platonic world or the Platonic school of thought, I know what it is. So here is an oak tree. That's an oak tree, right? Here is a, yes, there you go. This is a really shitty palm tree, right? What other trees are there? Here's like there you go. There's like the Charlie Brown tree, right? It looks like shit, okay? I know that each of these are instances of the idea of a tree because I already have this deep innate knowledge of treehood inside of me. That there's some big T perfect tree out there. And these are just the little guys. And the only reason why I know that they're the same, even though they look totally different, is because I have that weird heavenly knowledge of treeness inside of me. That's weird. Okay, when I first heard that, I was like, but this is the stupidest shit I've ever heard. Right. Yeah, Aristotle takes this story of a tree and he says, well, that's actually not what happens. Instead, and this is going to sound extremely common sense, okay? This notion of common sense is going to be extremely important to Aristotle. He's going to say, well, I actually know that this is a tree. The Charlie Brown tree is a tree. because I have experiences with a lot of different types of trees, and that it's through the experience of the tree, not the innate knowledge of treehood, that I can somehow make sense of the essence of a tree. So knowledge of the essence of a tree does not come from recollection, but it comes from looking at this shit, right? And for most people that hear that, it's like, oh yeah, duh, right? Of course, that's how I know what a tree is, right? And this is that move away from rationalism, right? That instead, knowledge is gained through posteriori experience, not that a priori reasoning. Yeah. He says we know what things are just by looking at them. Yeah. What do you think, Freddie? Does that make more sense?
Yeah, a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Do you think there are some things that we can have pre-knowledge about?
Yeah, right. So Aristotle is going to say that there's no content within the pre-knowledge. So like Aristotle is going to be the first guy, and this is included in our portal if you look at the posteriori analytic, right? He's the first guy to formalize logic, where we know the way in which propositions have to be. So if I have a proposition that says, if P, then Q, and I know that I have P, I have to reason to Q. I actually think I don't remember reading modus potens from him, at least not from the stuff that I put in our portal. But if Q, then R, I know that. This does not come from observation. This can't, right? Because this is just that sort of way that these true statements would have to be together. So I'll never be in a world in which this is true, and this is false. That'll never be. But there's no content to P. What the hell does P mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? So there's nothing in the world P is intrinsically referring to. Knowledge of the world always comes from experience of the world, right? And so this is where you see that sort of, yes, I mean, it's going to be really easy to notice where the scientific method is going to come from, right? Okay, hold on, let me pause this, you guys.
You want to listen to?
Let me pause this, hold on. Yeah, so there's going to be, or we have I should start with the epistemology stuff, right? So knowledge does not come to us from reason, right? So it's not reason that gives us knowledge, but instead it's observation.
And that's always the case?
When you talk about knowledge of the facts, yes.
Of the facts.
Of the facts.
Okay.
So there's nothing factual. Aristotle takes this radical empirical position that there's nothing factual to our logical syllogisms, like if P, then Q.
So like
if Q, then R. Because this, that structure of the propositions, it doesn't refer to anything actually in the world, right?
So, and I don't mean to get crazy on you.
No, go for it. Get crazy. This is all crazy stuff. Yeah.
So, if someone was to say aliens exist, right? It's never been observable. But within reason, you can see that, that there's probably other life forms outside of this
Right.
life.
So this is going to get into that notion of
The justice.
yes, justification. So we're going to be justified to make inferences, but to think that those inferences are justified apart from what we observe. So if I observe something in the world that matches this, and I observe something in the world that matches this, then I'm justified to come to a conclusion about this if this is referring to something in the world, right?
Even though you've never seen it, you've seen something like that.
Yes, because I have knowledge from, right? And then it's the same thing, right? It's the same thing we have when we talk about like the tree talk. So here's the Charlie Brown tree, right? Picture your Aristotle. And you look at this right? This guy's, Aristotle's real royalty. Okay, at least he's going to be when he takes on his mentor, right? Alexander the Great, yeah? And so he's real royalty. Let's pretend like he's never seen such a trashy tree before, but he's seen, right, these, man, I don't know what kind of trees they have in Greece, right? Some big old bonsai looking tree, right, that his boy Alexander came in and snuffed from some other country, right? Yeah. He's observed enough trees to come to an inference that this also has that essential property of being a tree as well. But this is purely inductive. And we'll talk more about induction versus deduction on Friday when we talk about Descartes, right? Okay. This is not reasoning to certainty, it's reasoning off of, well, it's just likely this way, right? But Socrates, but Aristotle, he still has this notion of, he's still being a realist about identity. And he's being a realist about the essence, right? And so, yeah, where do you think all that stuff is? So what made Platonism was such a serious contender in our metaphysics, and it still is a serious contender in our metaphysics, right? Descartes is a kind of Platonist, right? And Descartes is going to be almost as important as Aristotle in our history. Most physicists it's still built off of this Cartesian, pretty much everything, right? What's so appealing about the Platonism stuff is that we have an explanation for that essence. Yeah, that there's a spot where that essence is, and this makes sense, and this helps us make sense for why things are the way they are down here. But Aristotle doesn't believe that we can know anything we don't see, like Platonic heaven. But he still believes in essences or genuine identity. So then where are those that essential forms? Where the hell are they? Where are the forms? Where do those forms go? Where's that essence at? Have you guys ever seen an essence? No, you just see stuff, right? And even worse than that, right? So here's Scott. Here's Scott as a baby, right? This kind of looks like, for anyone that's played Shakiro, kind of looks like the Jesus statue, right? Here's Scott as a baby, and yet over time, Scott becomes what he is now, right? So let me try to draw Scott. Scott's got really big muscles, right? He's a good fighter. Okay, this looks like crap. Sorry, Scott. There we go. There's Scott. This looks like shit, right? If you guys can't see this, you're not missing out. If you can't see the board, this is Scott. I'm sorry, Scott. I'm trying to be too detailed. There we go. You're a stick figure now on the block. Okay. We think that Scott's identity persist over this whole time. Look, there's all this physical change, and yet the notion of Scott persists through all that goddamn change. But if I look at Scott as a baby, and I look at Scott now, they're not the same Scott. In fact, we know now that Scott holds none of the same material, like literal material. He shares none of it. None of that material is alive today with Scott now. But there's still Scott persisting over time. There's still an essence to Scott. And this essence is what is going to explain this movement through time, this consistency through time, this identity through time, and the behavior of transitioning from baby Scott to both boy Scott. Yeah. But where's the essence? Where's the essence? So like the Platonism story had a nice story. It had a nice explanation for it. It had a consistent story, right? There was nothing inconsistent between what it looks like we're seeing and the words about Platonism, right? Platonism can be true and it won't change the way we see anything now. But where's that weird metaphysics, that metaphysical realism about identity here? Where's your essence, Scott? What do you think? Do you think it's off somewhere on like an island and you're kind of like a radio antenna? Right, you're like taking orders from like the database, that the Platonic heaven database. What do you think, Eddie? Where's your essence? Yeah, it's going to be inside you, right? So Freddie pointed to his head, or Eddie, Freddie, whatever, whoever he is, Deshaun. Yeah, he takes the form out of the Platonic heaven and he puts it into the objects themselves. Yeah. And that when we look at the object, we are looking at the form. So we do, in fact, according to Aristotle, we know the essence of a thing by looking at it. Okay. This is this empiricism. Okay. So let's get a little more historical. Okay. So once we move away from this rationalism of Aristotle, we're going to get to see this empiricism put in action to build our metaphysics. And so first, what we're going to do, we're going to apply this methodology, this scientific methodology where you look at a thing, then you can reflect on it analytically, and you can come to a realization through observation first about what it is. Yeah. And so, first we're going to build our physics. So using this new method of knowledge, right, empiricism, yeah, we are going to build up we're going to be able to give explanation for why the physical world behaves the way it does. Yeah. And so what Aristotle is going to do, this is all going to be through observation. This is all going to be scientific, okay? We are going to try to break up the world, at least the material world, into its four most atomic pieces. Yeah. Aristotle is going to come up with an atomic category of like material. This is going to be, what do you think the atoms mean, Freddie or Scott?
Atom?
What's an atom?
Isn't it like the smallest?
Yes, the smallest piece of material we got. Yeah. And we're going to have four kinds of that.
Oh, fire.
Yes, right? Fire.
Avatar.
Earth, yes. Earth. We're going to have water.
Air, right?
And then we're going to have air, and that's it. Everything that you see materially is going to be composed of these atoms. They're going to have this atomic property to them. Okay? keep in mind, this is like 2,400 years ago, right? And this conversation about finding the atomic pieces goes even back to the pre-Socratic philosophers. Yeah. And we are going to know what these guys are through their natural states. I know what fire is, so now I'm applying this scientific methodology. I know what fire is by looking at what it does naturally. Yeah? So fire is, there's actually going to be 3 categories here, or 3 things, but for our conversation's sake, we're going to keep it, we're going to keep it at 2. Fire is light, and it's hot. Earth is heavy, and it is hot. Okay, so Scott, fill in these next ones. Water is
liquid.
No. So we're not talking there. Okay. I mean, we do talk wet and dry. That is the other thing.
So liquid.
Yes. Water. No. Water is going to be. Think about what water does. If I were to drop water, where would it go? It goes
down.
It goes down. So we call it. There we go. Heavy. And water is it hot or is it hot or
cold?
It's cold. It sounds so silly.
Yes,
it sounds like I'm tricking you.
Yeah.
Yes, it sounds like I'm tricking you, okay? So Eddie, air is light
I'd say cold, probably.
and
Can be
air.
hot.
Yeah, we can call air cold. Yeah. Okay, so shit, right? Now we know the basic atoms of what we're going to call Aristotelian physics, or common sense physics. Okay. And with me being able to know what these atoms are through what they do, I can now make sense of physical behavior, motion up and down. Okay, so Eddie, if I drop this marker, so now we're going to be Aristotelian physics. Erase all the physics you've ever had in high school or college or whatever, right? I'm going to drop this marker. Okay, I'm going to drop it. Let's predict in the future inductively what's going to happen. It's going to fall pretty close to straight down, right? Okay, why did it do that?
You let go.
Yeah, because I let go, right? That's a known answer. Sort of. Because it's heavy. There we go. Man, I wish if this were a full class, someone would be like, oh, because of gravity, right? Because gravity, that's why. But gravity is not here yet, okay? Don't talk witchcraft when we're talking common sense physics, Aristotelian physics, right? This falls because it's heavy. And how did you know it's heavy? Because it's Earth. There we go. Shit. All right. If I were to light this marker on fire, we don't not only get kicked out of this high school, but where would the fire go?
Up.
It would go up. And why would it go up?
Because it's light.
Because it's light. Shit. Okay. What about water? Where does water go? What?
Out.
It goes out, but it only goes out when there's room to go where?
Down.
When there's room to go down, right? That's not entirely true, but I'll explain. We're not explaining motion side to side just yet. We're building up our physics to just talk vertically at the moment, right? Okay, in air, when you breathe, right, and you see the smoke somehow, or the smoke, right? You know when you pretend to smoke weed, when your parents kick your ass? Well, you know when it's cold anyways. You go like this, and the air goes up. Why does it go up? Because it's light. There we go. Yes. All right. We have explained motion vertically. right? And we have, this is the key point, okay? This is why our talks on truth are so important. Why do we have a really good basis or an understanding of a philosophy of language, at least in some way? This atomic table right here gives us the language to express exactly what we mean when we describe the behavior of things, right? When I go to pick up this thing, it's not heavy, it's kind of heavy, right? Why is it so hard to pick up? Because it wants to go down. And why does it want to go down? Because it's made of a lot of earth, right? And earth wants to, in its natural state, when left by itself, earth will behave this way, right? Okay, so let's get more cosmic here. Why is the earth the center of the universe? Scott, only Scott. Yes, that's freaking dead. God, that's not even fun. It's not fun because you answered the correct answer, yes. It is the center, I mean, it's the heaviest. Where else is Earth supposed to be? But at the far bottom, right? That it's not some religious conspiracy for why we thought the Earth was the center of the universe. We thought it was the center of the universe because when we walk out of the cave, dragging our knuckles, that's what it looks like. And it makes sense with the way we understand everything else. 30 minutes left? God dang. Okay. No truth lecture today, guys. I take back what I said. You guys are just getting Aristotle. Okay. So, man, that's a bummer. Okay. Yeah, Earth is the center of the universe because it's the freaking heaviest. Okay. Why do you guys think the sun is in its 40 minutes? Oh yeah, way better. Okay. Why do you think 40 minutes? I mean, why do you think fire is? Why do you think this? God damn it, man! I'm freaking jacking this up.
Sorry.
Okay. Why is? God damn it! Why is the sun so high up there?
Because
Because it's
so light.
Because it's god dang so light. Here we go, you freakers. I'm trying not to cuss in case anybody's toddlers listening. Yeah, you guys figured it out, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. Okay. Aristotle actually changes this view of the stars and the sun. He eventually calls them celestial beings, that they're actually not a part of our atomic properties, but they're more like heavenly bodies that we get to see, right? But I mean, I would venture to say, right, and not that any academics are going to watch this, right? What I mean is, I don't think anyone's going to correct me on this. I'm pretty sure the common attitude at the time was that these things were up there, so like the sun and stars were up there because they were so light, because they were made of fire, right? And when they were there, when the sun shows up, it gets fucking hot. And why, right? Because the sun's fucking hot. There we go, right? This is commonsensical, right? And in fact, this is still how our language is organized. Our language is still organized in this way, right? When you explain to a toddler, right, why things are falling, you go, well, G equals yada, 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 yada. No, you say what? Because it's heavy. Heavy things fall. Light things go up. If it's light enough, it starts on its own going where? Way the hell up there, yeah? All right. But this is just motion. Remember, this is still through observation. We're not rationalizing to these truths. We are coming up with statements that we are taking to be true. We're taking to match the facts because we see the facts. Not because we reason to the facts, but because we see those facts. Okay? But this just explains motion up and down. What about motion left and right and everywhere in between? Yeah. We're going to call this when inorganic, so like non-living things move left and right. This is going to be a product of violence. So if the water, so picture like water crashing onto the rocks. if the water were in like a sort of like vacuum and were left to do whatever it wanted to do on its own, it would be going down because it's heavy. But because of something outside of it pushes up on it, it is violently made to go left and right. That's not the natural state of water, but instead that's a product of violence onto the water, right? Okay, so like here, if I let this marker do it at once, right, it goes down. If I throw it this way, right, against my friend's wall, yeah, okay. We call that violence on the marker, right? If Scott drives his fist through my face, right, it changes the way the face is naturally. We call this violence. Yes, it's super freaking common sense, okay? We still, no matter how much we formalize ideas of gravity and particles and stuff like this is still how we understand the world, right? This is still how we think about it. Okay, but that's not all of motion. It's not all of behavior. What about this behavior? So here's Scott. Okay. Here's Scott. Scott's swaddled in a little blanket. And now here's Scott now. Right. Scott's at a jiu-jitsu tournament ready to kick someone's ass. Scott is a national medalist at jiu-jitsu. Right. Right. What about this motion? This is a movement through what we assume is time. This is a kind of motion. And our atomic language right here is not, our language is not big enough to explain this. So now we have to move from the language concerning just our physics, and we have to move to our sort of metaphysics. So what's going to, okay, so here we have a story about causation. What's causing things like this to behave in the world the way they do? We are going to talk about, still as Aristotle contends, scientifically, through observation, we are going to come up with a story or a framework to talk about what causes this piece of material to become this piece of material. This is a big behavior. This is a big movement through time. Change, right? I can explain exactly why something inorganic that's just a bunch of earth behaves the way it does, but it's not enough to explain here. If I said, okay, Scott, why did you become from a baby to a badass, right? And you said, well, fire, right? It's so light. I'd be like, Scott, shut the fuck up, right? You don't know what you're talking about. Instead, we have to come up with new causes. So Aristotle is going to break up into, or he's going to, through observation, come up with our new metaphysics. Okay? So we're going to have 4 causes. The first cause is going to be the, I'm going to get a new marker. That one's dead, I think, though.
It's not. It's from my desk.
Oh, shoot. What caused it in the trash? Right.
Kobe did.
Yeah, Kobe did. Yes. Right. Our material cause. Okay. Our formal cause, And real quick, if you guys are wondering why we're watching this lecture, it's because I'm trying to do my best to make sure you don't have to read anything, right? So if you had to read this would be way worse than what we just read a minute ago, right? The form, I mean, you can read it, right? But I don't want to do it. The efficient cause, and then we have the final cause. Okay. So, what do you guys think the material cause is? We kind of just went over those.
What you just talked about.
Yeah, this is the stuff that a thing is made of. The stuff a thing is made of. And we're made of what? A collection of those atoms, right? So a bunch of these atoms, water, air, right? Earth especially. This determines how our material is going to behave. Okay? So I'm not flying through the sky. Why? Because I'm fucking heavy, right? I'm made of earth, right? This is what causes my material to behave the way it does. Yeah, what it's made out of. That collection of atomic, I don't want to call them particles. I'll just call them atomic pieces. Yeah. Okay. Then we have the formal cause. And so you can think of the formal cause. This is a word we've been using a lot, right? Did you look at that worksheet? A little bit, yeah. If you guys are still lost on that word form, right, man, look at that worksheet, yeah. That handout I gave on last Friday. The formal cause, this is the form the material takes. So, okay, if you look around, all you guys see basically is just a bunch of earth. But you see earth take a bunch of different forms, right? So the formal cause is the form that all this earth stuff is taking, right? And this is a sort of determinant of behavior, right? This whiteboard will never be able to throw. And why? Because it doesn't have the form to throw something. This, look at this arm, right? This arm has the form and has the ability to throw a thing. This form, this shape the thing takes is what Aristotle is going to call our formal cause. All right, now we get into the meat, okay? Now we have the efficient cause. And what do you guys think the efficient cause is? What does efficiency mean?
How something works?
Yeah, and yeah, how something works, and what do you mean by that?
How it's supposed to work.
There we go. Yeah, this is what the form and material. So I'm just going to leave the and material off because the form is, you can't have form without material. Remember, we're rejecting all that weird abstract concepts. No more abstraction, right? All material, then form, and then it's the efficiency of a thing. The efficient cause is what the form is made to do, right? So we can now have we can have a set of language, a language set that can give us an explanation for why Scott becomes what he does. So Scott lays there, right, in the shape that he does because he's made of this material, and that material took this form, right? And then we have the efficiency. What is a baby supposed to do? A baby is supposed to what? Yes, it's supposed to grow. It's supposed to become a man. Babies become men or women, right? Okay, I'm not trying to be sexist here. Although there's lots of sexism with Aristotle, but we can pretend like that's not true. Okay. Yeah. At least for now. This guy don't care, he's dead. Yeah, that this is where, right here, the efficient cause, this is where you get that essence. This is where the essence is. Wait, let me see. I can't even read it. Okay. I'm getting crude jokes in the back from the peanut gallery. What are you, knucklehead? No, I'm just kidding. This is where we get our efficient cause. And so this is the thing that the form and the material are supposed to be doing. This is the why the material takes this form. Okay. And then we're missing this one last cause. And Scott, what is this one last cause? So we're missing a piece. We, by necessity, at least according to Aristotle, we need another piece. So we have the material cause, we got the form all the material takes, and then we got the thing that all that stuff is for, the thing that it does. Right? What is that? What are we missing? So let's rehash this metaphysics in terms of a chair, right? So this chair, okay, this chair and this chair are both called what? Well, chairs, right? Okay. If you were to ask Plato why these are both chairs, you would get something along the lines of, well, they both partake in this weird abstract concept of chairhood. Socrates says, wrong answer. They're both called chairs because they do what? Yeah, they take the form of a chair, and they're what? They're meant to behave as a chair behaves. Freaking perfect. I can still talk about this essential identity without talking about this weird, crazy heaven. Right? But we still got some crazy metaphysics. Why? Because there's an essence to a chair. Right? So we're still not being totally metaphysically anti-realist. We're still believing in this weird ghost identity inside my material. This conception, right? Okay, so then what is missing here? What's missing in the story of the chairs? Go for it.
Whether it's good or not?
Yeah, so from the metaphysics, we are going to come up with a natural ethics, right? We'll get to ethics in like a second. We'll try to brief by that. Yeah. But what's missing here, man? We're missing something big. Huh?
I'm going to say spirit, but I don't think it's right.
So the spirit is actually going to be this guy. It embodies the spirit, the form of a chair, right? This material embodies the spirit of chairness, right? Okay, sounds crazy, but yeah, this is what I mean. I'm not a dog. Why? Because I have a different form than a dog, and I'm meant to do stuff different than a dog is meant to do. And this is going to determine how we talk about good in a second. Okay, we're going to have an idea, what Aristotle believes, a scientific idea of character in a second, right? That science is actually going to birth ethics in this way, right? But we're missing that one last thing, man. So we need to have a cause for all this, for this whole set. Who caused all this BS to happen? Really, who made this chair? Let's finish around. Yeah, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Glass design. Let's just say China. Just a random country. A random country, right? It could have been anyone that made the chair, right? But let's just say, right, this was made in a really nice little factory in China, okay? Just like my extremely expensive iPhone. Yeah?
Micro maybe.
Yeah, Vicro. Oh, there we go. Oh, there. That's Chinese, I think, right? Yeah. Who makes chairs? Who makes up the people in China?
This is actually built in the United States.
Oh, it is built in the United States?
Stereotype.
Well, good for them, right? Born in the USA, yeah. All right. Who makes chairs? Chair makers. God dang it. Yes, chair makers. That's exactly right. We need, in the final cause, right? We need the thing. This is the thing that causes the efficiency, right, in the object. Yeah, the thing that causes all this stuff. Okay, so now this is really easy. Who is the final cause of a house? A housemaker. Great. Who's the, let's see here. Who is, yeah, who's the final cause of a sandwich? A sandwich maker. All right. Now, who's the final cause of a dog? Yeah, the parent dogs. Okay. But the parent dogs isn't actually producing, it's not putting the conception. It's not putting the blueprint. I mean, it is, right? Aristotle's talking about blueprints in the same way that we talk about DNA. In fact, Darwin calls Aristotle his God, right? Darwin, St. Thomas Aquinas, okay, major figure in the Catholic Church, and Aristotle are all champions of this sort of natural evolution. Okay, but we can trace back final causes over and over and over again. What's the final cause of a dog? Who creates dogs to be dog-like? Starts with a G. Just say it, Eddie. God. Yes, God. There we go, right? God's going to have to be this true final cause. We're going to have a God to have this true identity, at least according to Aristotle. It's not going to be Zeus, right? He's going to be doing his own little God thing, right? His own weird version of it. It's going to be more of like a force, but we don't really talk in terms of force at this point, right? Force is not part of our language, right? We're not going to need that till all that other stuff I pointed out earlier fails. Yeah. God is what puts this whole story of Scott together. And so, boom, we have a crazy metaphysics. We have a crazy metaphysics around our physics, the material stuff, the stuff about atomic properties. And man, now I have an explanation for why physical things behave the way they do, for why the world is the way it is. Okay, so this ethics talk, right? Aristotle thinks that all of this talk of science, so it goes philosophy is giving birth to science, and it's still the case today. Philosophy gives birth to science. Science gives birth to, he's going to say ethics, and then ethics is going to give birth to politics. All of this entire pursuit of knowledge is going to teach us how to be good citizens, how to be good. But this word good is going to be, it's going to be a tricky one. It's not going to be the word good that we're used to per se. It's going to be a different kind of good. Yeah, and it's going to do a lot of explaining for someone like Alexander the Great. Okay. Right. So, Aristotle's, when we talk about good, weirdly enough, it's not the question about what it means to be good is not going to be a question about what rules should I be following, should I be making myself feel good per se. No, and we're going to talk about eudaimonia a little bit. Well, actually, we're not. We're going to bypass the eudaimonia part, right? Just because we want to stay more. Well, yeah, we just want to get, well, yeah, it's just too big of a conversation, right? So when I talk about Scott, right, and then I talk about just again, right? There we go. He's a good fighter, right? He's a good, right? Notice I used the word good, okay? You guys think back to the way we talk now, it's still rooted in this Aristotelian physics, yeah? So what is going to make Scott, what is going to make this tiny little nugget of a thing a person? Well, the fact that Scott has the potential Scott is going to have the potential to do what a person would do. The potential to do what a person would do is what makes Scott a person. Okay? So a dog, this is my best drawing today, right? A dog is not a person because it doesn't have the potential to do what a person in particular can do, right? So a dog is also not, it's not an acorn because it can't do what acorns do. So what do acorns do? Acorns do what? Yes. An acorn is an acorn if it has the potential to become an oak tree. So to get the identity of an acorn, you got to be able to become an oak tree. So what makes an acorn a good acorn? Yes. We say yes, a good acorn becomes an oak tree. So the difference between just an acorn and a good acorn is you fulfilling that efficient cause, you fulfilling your essence, you becoming what you were meant to do, you doing what you're supposed to do. That's what makes you good. We call that good, right? Now notice that this isn't really like, what about all the sad disabled acorns? Man, that sucks, right? An acorn that's just got it fell on the sidewalk and didn't fall on the grass. Do we say, man, that's a bad acorn? In this context, we do. Good acorns are lucky enough to be put in this situation. The term good and bad here is not derogatory, it's performative, which is why we can see it, right? Because it's a matter of performance. In fact, he doesn't believe in good acorns. He doesn't believe in good kids. He only believes we call a kid good because we see the potential to become what they're designed to become. And if they stray from that, then they were never really good in the first place, right? But it's not meant to be mean. It's just meant to be almost scientific, right? It's like when we talk about the greatest basketball players of all time, right? Charles Barkley doesn't have a ring. He was good enough to be an NBA champion, but he never was. So boom, we say he wasn't the greatest. He wasn't the best, right? But remember that to become good, to become what you're supposed to, this is internal, right? So this is about your character, right? That we call somebody good when they fulfill the conception put inside them, right? And for you guys, for you Catholics watching, you can see why the Catholic Church is going to jump all over this. You get identity. You get a notion of this potential or this purpose, or here's the big word, this efficient cause. This is what we're going to identify with as your telos. What you're made to do. Right? So if you're a person, but you live like a dog, we call you a bad person. If you're a person, and what do you think the thing that people do that separates them as their own creature, what do you think that is? What do we do that other creatures don't? At least in the way we do it. We're doing it right now. Everybody with, yes, conversation and reasoning. Reasoning, right. So when we finish this last lecture on truth, which I'm not getting to today, you'll understand what I mean by the language is going to be the building block of the reasoning. You're not going to be able to reason without the language, right? Because, well, you can't reason from. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll explain. Yeah, by Friday, hopefully. Yeah. So Scott becomes a good person if he embodies the characteristics. There we go. I'm sounding what? God did, like I'm talking science, like I'm talking biology. Okay. Scott becomes a good person when he embodies the characteristics of personhood. If he embodies the characteristics of a dog, that's why we talk shit, call people dog. Oh man, you're nothing but a dog, right? Yeah. As soon as someone cheats, they get called a dog. Why? Because you're not supposed to be a dog. You're supposed to be what? A person. If my dog comes in here and starts speaking Spanish or English to me, right? And starts giving me, right, I don't know, argumentation, I'd be scared. I'd say there's something not right going on here. Or if Scott's eating almonds, right? If Scott's almonds right, jumped up and started dabbing and like crip walking and stuff, right? I'd be like, whoa, man, almonds aren't supposed to do that. That's not in the characteristics of an almond. Bad almond, okay? Bad almond, not good, right? All right. So now we have Aristotle lays out an entire worldview for us. An entire worldview for us. Yeah. That starts with this epistemology of empiricism. Yeah. It rejects this Platonic heaven and says, okay, these ideas aren't out in some weird space I can't see. They're actually here, and I'm looking at them. I'm seeing these ideas instantiated in the physical, right? So where does this leave us historically? Well, Aristotle, naturally, because he thinks he can look at things and categorize them correctly by what they do, he starts to create biology. I mean, yeah. So Aristotle leaves the academy, he moves back to Mesopotamia, goes back home, right? He opens up the equivalents of the academy in Mesopotamia. It's called Greek for like walking through the garden or something like what we would call cheesy now, right? But probably really freaking important deep back then, right? Yeah, he starts this up and he takes on a mentor. That mentor is, Scott, I've told you this before, who is this really important historical mentor that Aristotle picks up? Alexander the freaking Great. And guess what Alexander the Great does? Yes, Alexander the Great becomes a good, that's a quote, right? Becomes a good person. Yeah. He starts doing things. He starts embodying this characteristic or this good virtue. Or virtue is supposed to be synonymous with good character. He embodies this virtue. And he goes out to be, so remember, because Aristotle is an empiricist, he thinks that knowledge and knowing how to be a good citizen or whatever, that gets known through examples, exemplars you call them. So how do you become a good person? Well, you have to go out, right, be empirical, scientific, and you have to go and look at good examples to learn. It's not realizing, you don't have this essential spirit in you that just knows, right? You have to go out and learn from experience. Yeah. So there are these exemplars on how to be a good person. And Alexander the Great, who is studying exactly under Aristotle, he goes out in the world and he tries to be this exemplar for the rest of the world. And what does he do? Remember, the Christian ethic does not exist here. Yes, he goes out and he starts whooping everybody's ass. And he continues to study and to reason, right? And to deal with like poetry and art and all this other BS, yeah? He goes out, he continues to snatch up animals and send them back to Mesopotamia so that Aristotle can build up our biology, our categories, our biological systems, right? And yeah, he goes out and he tries to live this exemplar life for everyone to look up to. And you know the craziest part is he would go out and pillage and enslave, most of the Western world at the time. And the good bulk of them, they actually love that idiot. And why do they love him? Because he is good. He's good, right? He's strong, he's powerful, he's competent, he's talented. At least that's the appearance he's given. He's also extremely rich, so we're not exactly sure how much competence over how much actual power, how much competence per dollar he has, right? But yeah, people love him, they look up to him. Yeah. And that's crazy. So this all, as soon as, and we're going to read a text later half of the semester, as soon as Christ comes into the picture and we have a new archetype for goodness, this is the set standard for goodness, man. I mean, look at ancient Greek literature. What is it? It's all heroism, adventure, right? If we were to hang out with Homer or whoever, now we'd be like, all right, Homer, you're kind of a creep, bro. We wouldn't like him, yeah? But this was the archetype for goodness. This is what we were supposed to do. This was our telos, yeah? At least back then, okay? So this story right here, this creates Western civilization. This creates the West that we continue to live in today, yeah? This whole system of empiricism, this is going to come to a halt. This is going to come to a halt when we find out that our fire, earth, air, and water, that this scientific language actually isn't expressive, and the language is not expressive enough to explain the stuff we're starting to see, like with Galileo, Copernicus, right? And if this language is not the case, well, all of this other stuff that not only the ancients, but the medievals, so the Catholics, the Muslims, right, that we all are hanging on this idea of a telos potentiality, right? Once this gets skepticized against, the whole system gets thrown into a crisis. And this is the real reason why we have such a resistance to the scientific revolution. Because this science lasted us and continues to last us in some areas. In biology, for sure, this is still how we do it. Methodology for biology is a lot different than methodology for physics. Our sciences don't get along at all. Okay, we're going to get more into that on Friday. This is going to last us for over 2,000 freaking years. And when this gets disrupted, everyone's entire worldview gets thrown on its head. And that common sense understanding that we had of the world gets completely challenged and people go haywire. It's not just religious conspiracy, right? But it's the fact that what comes next with Descartes, Galileo, Copernicus, right? So kick off Galileo and Copernicus, Descartes, Newton, Leibniz. All these guys are like theologian types. They're for the most, you could consider most of them kind of Catholic, right? Even though they're a part of this Catholic sect, that's a nice word, sect. Even though they're part of this group, right? What they say is so radical and so against what we actually observe that that's where the real hate's going to come from. Yeah, and so that's where we'll pick up on. Yeah, but this is going to last us for over 2,000 years. It's still how we talk about the world today, right? You know, I mean, it's hard to have notions of justice without potentiality to do things. Our new physics, our scientific revolution is going to steal that potentiality, right? It's going to steal the identity, and in fact, it's going to steal our notion of knowledge. We're not going to have knowledge anymore, at least not in a real way, until Descartes tries to. What you guys are reading now with Descartes, okay, is going to be a sort of like, okay, this rejection of Aristotelian physics does not have to be the death of our identity, our free will, and it doesn't have to be the death of scientific knowledge. Knowledge is still possible. And look, we could even predict the future with it. Maybe it's even better than before. Yeah, so that's what you guys are reading with the Descartes stuff. All right. But you guys won't understand it until after you've read the Descartes stuff. So, all right, I'll see you guys.